Okay, so here's a question for you. Picking up on that, a sister saying, thanks for organizing the topic. My husband and I have similar backgrounds in Islamic education. However, I'm lazy when it comes to prayers. I know that it definitely turns him off when I don't pray. For instance, he'll avoid intimacy with me in the evening because he fears I'll not wake up in the middle of the night for ghusl on time for Fajr prayer. He'll prefer mornings after Fajr, which is a moment that doesn't work for me because the babies are usually waking up. However, I don't want to pray just to make him happy, especially when it's something I'm struggling with. I don't want to lose his respect and his affection. Sometimes I think he regards me as a hypocrite because I have a lot of Islamic knowledge but no motivation for prayer. Help, I'm stuck.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, Jazakallah khair for the question. I think this is a very real question. I would say that there's two ways of looking at this. The sister mentioned something important. She said she doesn't want to just do her prayers for the sake of pleasing her husband because then she's going to feel even more like a hypocrite. Okay, so there's this thing that happens where when we're discouraged from doing an act of worship because other people will approve of it, and we don't want to do it for the sake of their approval. That situation, scholars have described as also being a situation where we are experiencing riya, where our behavior is still being motivated by people, and I'll explain why. If a person prays only to impress someone, then that's riya. That's the concept of praying for the sake of being seen. When a person doesn't pray, so that because they're afraid that that person will approve of them, their motivating factor for their behavior is still that other person. And for that reason, because the motivator is still another person rather than the motivator being Allah, then that behavior is still described as acting as with riya, with being motivated by other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in order for us to do the right thing, we have to do the right thing and not care whether or not someone approves or disapproves. And my advice for the sister who is struggling with prayer is to, alhamdulillah, you have Islamic knowledge. I would say that the next stage, knowledge is not necessarily something that can make us, I want to say, put us at a higher spiritual level. I'm forgetting who, one of the scholars mentioned that they studied fiqh for a number of years and their heart remained hard. And then so they asked their teacher, I've studied fiqh, I've studied all these rules for all these years, and I still feel like my heart is hard and far from Allah. And the scholar told them to study the Quran. And then that particular scholar says, after I started studying the Quran, my heart opened up and it finally became soft. So knowledge in and of itself, especially technical knowledge, may not necessarily have that softening impact on our hearts that make worship enjoyable for us. For prayer, I would encourage the sister to study how to attain khushu' in prayer. There's different books that talk about it. I will just give 4 tips that Imam Nawawi talks about when he's actually talking about the hadith on intentions. He talks about khushu' in there, which I think is really, really interesting. But khushu' in prayer attained by 4 different things. When you pray, every time you pray, it's a struggle to do this, but because the tendency is to want to just, especially if you're feeling sort of lazy with prayers, the tendency is to want to get it over with. Stop yourself, because whenever you want to get it over with, realize that the time that you take in prayer doesn't change much if you just apply the spiritual struggle. So the benefit that you're going to get out of a prayer with the spiritual struggle is so much more than the benefit of the prayer that you take and you're just trying to get through it. And the same amount of time or similar amounts of time are going to be spent. So you're not losing any time. Actually, you're going to have blessings in your time when you try to go through the spiritual struggle of attaining the sweetness of prayer. The first one is to consciously recognize what you're saying in prayer. So know the meanings of what you're saying as you're saying them. Think about the meanings of what you're saying as you're saying them. Your mind has to be present. The second one is to allow your heart to be present. Open your heart up and take a moment to realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at the state of your heart in prayer. So open your mind, let your mind witness to what you're saying, let your heart become present. The third one is, in every position of prayer, try to be in that position and let that position express the highest levels of humility before Allah. So in sujood, really try to let your body and your limbs express humility. In ruku', really try to let your limbs express humility. Think about, I want my body, if my body could say anything, I want my body to express absolute humbleness before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the fourth and final one is in prayer to not be fidgety, to be very still in every position that you're taking. And I have never gone through this spiritual exercise in prayer where I'm trying to get into my salah and I realize I'm praying absent-mindedly. Whenever I've tried to apply these four things, subhanAllah, every single time I've been able to appreciate and taste some of the sweetness of that prayer. And may Allah accept and reward for Imam Nawawi who gave us this advice. Once you apply this, you get to experience the sweetness of prayer, prayer no longer becomes a burden, it becomes a break. It becomes a break from the material world. The world is full of so many, it's dull and boring in comparison to prayer. Prayer is a chance for you to just get away from the world, get away from being a mom, even get away from the baby, get away from the husband, get away from life, and just connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's like five little vacations in the day to get away from this life and connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you can change your mindset of looking at prayer as this is a break, this is spiritual relaxation, you would not be lazy with it. You'd be like, I'm going to take my break. I'm going to go take the vacation away from this life that I need. So I hope that's of help to you, inshallah.
Shaykha, how much time do we have with you? Because I know originally you said you need to go around 11:45 because I believe your husband has another commitment and you guys have to juggle the baby. Are you still on needing to skip out on that time? I believe it's 11:45 now.
Okay. My husband's I know he has the baby with him. I was like, can we go for 4 more or 5 more minutes?
Sure. And he can even pass you the baby and we don't care. If we can keep you longer and you have the little baby cooing in the background, that's fine by me. Whatever works best for you guys. So just let me know. Feel free. Well, let me throw in another quick question then. And then, if you can stay for a few minutes and you're home and grab the baby and stay as long as baby lets you, we'd be more than happy. We're mostly moms here. So, okay, so the question is, what if you feel that your iman is going down because of your spouse? I'm worried because I used to feel more religious before marriage. I would go to halakas often, but now I feel my spouse would rather that I stay at home.
Okay. In this case, and it's limited information. I don't know all of the details, but what I would say is it seems, wallahu alam, Allah knows your situation best. It seems that the sister may be, I want to say, giving in to pleasing her spouse at the expense of her own iman. So let's say a lot of times, if this some people are just very, what's the word? They want to be easy. They want to be an easy person to be married to, right? So let's say let's go to the class, and the husband's like, I don't really feel like it. I want to stay home. It's very easy in that situation to be like, okay, let's eat something, let's have dessert or whatever, let's just do something at home, and to be very, let's say, compliant in a situation without expressing a desire to actually, that class seems really exciting, or be a little bit more encouraging. So what I would say is, in order for you to help your husband, you have to help yourself. So whatever you need to do to keep your iman at a high level and keep yourself close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have to be able to maintain that in your schedule. And if he doesn't prevent you from going, then that's a good sign. That means that he's just having an iman low, but that doesn't mean that he's against religiosity or practice or commitment. So you should continue to go. And they always say when you get on an airplane, before you put the oxygen mask on yourself, if there was an accident or something, before you put the oxygen mask on your child, put it on yourself. So you have to save yourself before you can save someone else or help bring someone else to a higher level of practice. And there are, in order to get your own iman to where it needs to be, there are ways of doing that which are not going to be disruptive to your marriage. So I guess that's my encouragement, is to take a more proactive position with your own iman. Don't see him as being the fault or blame it on him, especially if he's not preventing you. If he says, go ahead, or I prefer if you stay at home, but you can go if you really want. If that's the position they have, they're not preventing you. they're just expressing something which reflects maybe the state of their own iman. But yeah, don't blame it on him. Take full responsibility for that, and know that it's the ball's in your court.
Jazakumullah khair. And just a reflection to add to that for that sister in that situation, you know, maybe he doesn't want to go to the class, or he really doesn't want to go out and he wants you to be home. I think also is flipping that around and noticing, you know, alhamdulillah, you have a husband who wants to be with you. Alhamdulillah, you have a husband who enjoys your company. You know, alhamdulillah, you know, he loves to spend time with you. And I think when we can also see that there is, like you said, he's not an obstacle, he's not, you know, standing in your way, but maybe his iman's not where yours at, or his activism level isn't. But like, first, let's flip it around to preserve that love. Alhamdulillah, I have a spouse who wants to be around me and be with me. And of course, not letting that take her away, but just, I think, just being able to, I like encouraging people to see what's going right in a situation that also is proposing a bit of a challenge. I hope that makes sense. So,
absolutely.
Okay. It's 11:50. I'm going to let you go. And I'll wrap up with the audience. But I will let you go, so you can take back the baby, inshallah, and your husband can get to where he needs to go on time. Jazakumullah khair, Shaykha, so much for your words. Alhamdulillah, there's a lot to go through here, and we hope we can have you back sometime in the future. So
may Allah accept from all of us, inshallah. Make things easy.
All right, take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Okay, so I'll just wrap up with some concluding thoughts. Mashallah, they are, you know, mashallah, new parents and balancing a little baby as you hear in the background. So make dua for her. We all know what it's like to try to get to an event when you have such a little one whose needs are so unpredictable, alhamdulillah. And even though in the beginning of the webcast there were some muffled things, I think after we got that there were so many gems, I really want to go back and absorb them. There are a lot of questions from many of you. And I'm not the person to give you your fiqh answers or your Islamic nasiha in the Deen. I just want to close off with a few comments just from the marital perspective of maintaining love in this regard. Everything that she said, like I really want to, for myself, go back and pull out all of these quotes and bring them back to the surface. There's so many questions here that are just coming in about, you know, respecting your husband, or how can I still respect him when I feel religiously we're different, or it feels like such a drag, I want to go to a class and he doesn't. Hopefully you caught some of her advice already in there. For example, focusing on the things that does bring your spouse to life, or like she said, if he's not standing in your way, do the things that bring you enjoyment, and accept the fact that maybe you two aren't going to be on the same wavelength in terms of what inspires you, and make space for you to be different. Like I know sometimes when we get married, there is kind of a, like the romantic Muslim fantasy is of a husband and wife who will go to classes together and halqas together and qiyam al-layl together. And there's like this whole idea in our heads of what things should be like. And sometimes it's not that way. And that's for both men and women. There are husbands who get married believing that the woman they marry is going to wake him up for Fajr and join him for Qiyam al-Layl, and she's going to support him in da'wah, and then he finds that she's not also on the same wavelength as he is. Because we don't want to make this sound biased, but because we're just talking to women, we tend to think of we're focusing on the one angle. But, you know, accepting first and foremost that you don't have to be on the same wavelength to still have a loving relationship with your spouse. And I think, again, if we can go back, inshallah, it'd be great if we could all share our gems and notes later on this. Just, you know, like what she was talking about, not being in a place of judgment, not being in a place of arrogance, not looking down. That's part of what's going to maintain that level of respect for your spouse, even though there are things that they're doing that you may not like or you may wish that they were doing different. The reality is that always goes two ways, and that there are things that your spouse wishes that you would do different. And there are things that they don't like and have about you, and they have to be patient with. When we put on this religiosity hat, unfortunately, we become, we look at our spouse from a place of just seeing what's wrong with them and thinking we're absolved from their opinion going the other way. And even if you're the more quote-unquote practicing person, that still doesn't mean that your character, your behavior, your interactions with your spouse are perfect and flawless. And that they still, too, also have opinions of things that they're being patient with or don't prefer. So just remembering that there's a two-way street, first of all, will help us keep that place of humility. Number two, accept it's okay if you're not on the same exact wavelength. It's what you do with it, with all the beautiful advice she offered, that's going to make the difference between can you maintain a loving, connected relationship. My favorite piece of advice she gave was start with the two things. Start with the easy things. What's the speaker that inspires them? Or what is the nasheed that inspires them? Or what place do they like to go to? Which masjid do they like to be a part of? Do they have a social group that keeps them connected? I really loved that piece of advice because it's instead of trying to conform someone to what I want, it's supporting them in what's really best and good for them. And that's what you want too, right? You want your spouse to support you and what's best and good for you. So it's this process of letting go, inshallah. And then number two, just because in marriage this concept of love and respect for each other is so important, I always, the reason I wanted to put this topic together is because I'm always trying to reiterate that you have to see your spouse as who they really are. And that is a human being who is a struggling individual, a soul struggling, just like every single human being is struggling, and we're all struggling to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to earn the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're all struggling and striving to get to Jannah. Some of us are currently falling down. Some of us are in dark holes trying to get out. Some of us, alhamdulillah, have wings and we're soaring right now. But Allahu alam, what test comes and then we become that, in that opposite place. We're all in different places in our iman, and it changes all of the time. What it is it's breaking away from the fantasy of what love and marriage is supposed to be, quote unquote, according to our media or according to what the outside world says, because the outside world's focused just on love and romance, not purpose, not deen, not ibadah, not worship. Love, romance is all a part of this process, while understanding that ultimately we are souls struggling to get back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to get back to our original home, which is Jannah. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all to get there. When you can step back and just pause for a second and see first yourself and then your spouse as people who are struggling. And you can create vulnerable conversation about your spiritual struggle with your spouse, rather than, like, I love the sister's question about, struggling with her prayers, alhamdulillah. That's vulnerability, and that's beautiful. And if she can find a way to tell her husband, I'm really struggling. I'm really struggling. I don't know why I'm struggling. I'm really struggling. And I want to change. I don't know how. And here's how you can support me, and even just laying that out there and just being open and putting that ego down, that can bring a couple together. These different wavelengths ultimately can bring us closer together rather than bringing us apart. It's all in the approach that we take. So I pray, inshallah, everyone benefits.